Hey, it's Jeff from Echo Engagement. And a couple of weeks ago, I hosted the Association Summit because I wanted to hear from leaders like you about the pains that they were having, the struggles that they were going through, and the concerns that they had about continuing to deliver value for their members and their sponsors in the face of this COVID-19 crisis. And so this video is what I put together as a result of that conversation. It's the things that I drew out of that conversation and the resources that I gathered up. Now, the video itself is about 27 minutes long. So what I did at the very beginning was pull together a little slideshow with some bullet points and an outline of what we talked about, all of which is expanded upon in the video. There's some URLs in there and some resources. So if you just have a couple of minutes of time, check out the slideshow. If you need further explanation, watch the video. But if you want to talk about any of these things, I'm going to include my Calendly link. It's something that you can go to and click directly to my calendar and schedule 10 or 15 minutes of time for us to talk. And maybe I can shed some light on the things that we talked about at the Association Summit and that I'm talking about in the video. I hope this helps you in some way. If you lead a professional organization, or maybe you hold a volunteer board position in a professional organization, I understand that times might be really tough right now. And I think one of the biggest threats, one of the biggest concerns that you may have is that your members and your sponsors are already having to make, but will certainly have to make more tough choices. And my biggest fear is that if we get down the road 3 months or maybe even 6 months and someone looks back and says, you know what, I've got to make some tough choices. I've got to make some cuts. And I haven't done much or I haven't heard much from this organization. And to be quite honest, I haven't really missed it. So it becomes really easy for them to cross you off the list, right? There's a lot at stake. You have to continue to deliver value, maybe more value than ever, to your members, to your sponsors, so that you can continue to survive and even thrive into the future beyond this COVID-19 crisis. I'm Jeff Eccles. I'm the President and Chief Strategy Officer of Echo Engagement. I've been a member of associations for over 25 years. I've worked with associations and for associations. I've even served on committees in associations. And the last thing that I want to do is see you suffer in the midst of this crisis that we're currently in. So this video is my gift to you. I hope it helps in some way. I hope you're able to use this information to deliver unexpected value to your members and to your sponsors, because I know everyone's having to make tough choices right now, and I don't want that tough choice to be crossing your name, your association name, off of the list of things that they're going to continue to pay for and support. So watch this video. Let me know if you need more information. Let me know if you have questions or if you need help. I'm here for you. I'm glad to help. Just reach out and let's have a conversation. A couple of weeks ago, I hosted a conversation for association executives and volunteer members, and I called it the Association Summit. I wanted to hear what you had to say about your upcoming programming, your events, things like that. And the reason that I decided to host that summit was that one Monday morning I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and I saw, understandably so, I saw everybody canceling and delaying your events and your programs. I'd scroll through and I'd see SMPS Orange County had canceled, or ACEC Triangle had canceled or postponed an event. And I get it. I understand. That's what we have to do. That's what's necessary during this time of crisis. But what concerns me is that we need to continue to have a growth mindset. We need to continue to figure out how we can add, how we can deliver value to our members and our sponsors. And so there's some things that came out of that conversation that I wanted to share with you now. Maybe this is a recap of sorts of that conversation, but here's some thoughts, maybe some things that you can use, some things that you can find value in and be able to use that to deliver value to your members and your sponsors. The first idea is that you need to be communicating more with your members and your sponsors right now, not less. That includes email and maybe phone calls and social media posts, certainly. But when we think of programming, when we think of events, whether it's the educational side or the event side, you need to be doing more of that now, not less. And so there's a few things that I want you to keep in mind when we think about how do we deliver more programming than we were before. Number one is that I get it that you have been canceling, you've been delaying. There's a lot up in the air. How do we pull all these things together? How do we do this when everyone is forced into social distancing? Everybody is forced to work remotely. How do we pull these events and these programs together? Well, my encouragement to you is it's now maybe easier and maybe more affordable than ever in a virtual world. And we'll talk about that later in this video. The second thing is I understand the knee-jerk reaction and the need or the want to pull back and say, well, you know, our national organization has these recorded webinars. We can pass those on to members. We can host those. And there's also this idea that, well, CEUs rule the day. So let's just do a bunch of CEU programs or a bunch of CEU lunch and learn type programs. But let me ask you to think about something for a minute. If you're canceling or delaying events, if you're simply pushing out the recorded webinars that your national organization has, if you're simply providing the CEU lunch and learn presentations from your sponsors and from product manufacturers, not to knock any of those things at all, but if that's all you're doing, let me remind you that you're not adding any value for your members or your sponsors. Those are things that they can already get. Those are things that cancellations and delays, that's not adding value. That's just pushing things back. That's taking value away. The pre-recorded webinars from National, those are things they can get anyway. The lunch and learns for CEU programs, those are things that they can get anyway. So get out of the mindset of canceling, delaying, providing those things that you already have in the can. Those are stopgap measures, certainly. That's understandable, certainly. But It's not adding value to your members or sponsors. So we have to get in the mindset of how do we provide programming that delivers value to those members and sponsors. We're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to think differently. And we're going to have to break the mindset that doing something on Zoom or some other virtual platform is a webinar, that it's a recorded thing, that it's a static thing. Break the mindset that the platform is what's important. Get into the mindset that we can be creative, that we can add value, that we can do interesting things through video and virtual platforms that we've never done before. Now, I understand that you may have some technological challenges in front of you. You know, there's this thing of the curse of knowledge, right? Everything that I know, certainly everyone else knows. If I know it, why wouldn't they know it? Well, I get it. I use Zoom. I use virtual platforms all the time, but you may not. You may have never used Zoom or GoToMeeting or Blue Jeans or any of those platforms for any of your chapter events before. I get it. So let me walk you through a few areas of technology, a few best practices, if you will, that you need to pay attention to in order to have a successful event. The first thing that you need to do in order to help your members and sponsors, number one, enjoy, and number two, engage with these new virtual events is remove as much friction as possible. Make everything as simple as possible. And in order to do that, that'll include a few key points. Number one, use the same platform every time. You may be tempted to let sponsors or presenters present their program or run a meeting on the platform that they use, for instance, Zoom or GoToMeeting. Don't do that. Get your own subscription to whatever platform that you want to use and use that platform, control that platform so it's the same process for all of your members, all your sponsors, all of your attendees every single time that you host a program. The second thing is create simple instructions. Whether you record a video like I often do, or you write the instructions out and you put them in an Eventbrite invitation, whatever you do, create simple instructions and think through step by step. How does someone who's never used this platform before, step by step, how do they get in, how do they use it, and how do they run it? Now, once you get inside the meeting, inside the program, make sure that your moderator, whoever's running the meeting for you, walks people through the features and gives people instructions on how to interact, how to listen, how to respect others, and how to enjoy the meeting as best they can. Remember, our goal is to remove as much friction and to make it as easy for everyone involved as possible. The second thing that you need to do is get a great moderator. Whoever that is, they're the person that needs to provide the technology platform for you, whether it's Zoom or any other platform. They can provide that for you. They're essentially the host of your meeting. And think of them like an MC. They're going to run it. They're going to be the master of ceremonies. They're not necessarily going to be the presenter, but they're the person that's there to take care of the technology. They're the person that's there to handle the questions and the answers, to watch the chat box. They're the person that's there to take care of trouble if it arises, and they're the person that keeps the whole thing moving. Just like any live event, you need to have someone on your program, in your program, that's keeping things running, that's moderating things, and to keep you out of trouble. And the third thing that you need to do under the category of technology is what I'm calling train your presenters. Now, I don't mean that you need to take someone that's used to presenting their work from stage and teach them how to project their voice or the posture that they need to take or even how to design their presentation. But you need to train them on the basics of doing a virtual presentation. They need to know best practices for 4 basic things. Number 1, lighting. Number 2, sound. Number 3, camera. And number 4, action. So let's review the 4 points and look at some best practices. Number 1, lighting. Lighting doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive, but let's start with the idea of don't sit in front of a window. Anybody that's backlit ends up being a silhouette on the screen. Have simple lighting that lights your face. You can worry about casting shadows and things that make you look old or like something out of a horror movie, but simple lighting that lights the presenter from the front is just fine. Number 2, sound. What are best practices for sound? Remember, if I can't hear the presentation, I'm not going to pay attention. I'm going to log off. I'm going to leave, and I'm not going to come back next time. So your presenters need to have a decent microphone first. Now, they don't necessarily have to have a professional podcasting microphone. Most modern earbuds will deliver a pretty decent sound for the audience. But they need to have something plugged in that's picking up their voice and keeping away from any sort of distractions or any sort of echoing or reverberation. The best thing to do is to plug in earbuds or to plug in a microphone. The second aspect of sound is when they're presenting, they need to be in a quiet, calm space. Hey, I get it. We're all working remotely. We're surrounded by our children. We're surrounded by our pets. We're in our homes, probably in an environment that wasn't necessarily meant to be a stage for presentations. But we've got to do everything that we can to calm that environment, quiet that environment. Use some earbuds, plug in a microphone, do whatever it takes, but your presenters need to have decent sound. Point number 3, camera. Your presenters have to have a decent camera. And again, this doesn't mean it has to be complicated or expensive. I'm recording this video through the camera in my laptop. It's that simple. Now, one thing to note is that decent lighting carries your camera a long way. So if I were sitting in front of a bay window right now, all backlit, this camera would make me look terrible. It would not be a decent image for a presentation in a good quality program that's adding value for your members and sponsors. So make sure, number 1, that your presenters have a camera, that they have a webcam, and number 2, that their lighting is set up well, and number 3, that they're doing things like looking into the camera, my eyes looking right at the camera. If I'm looking down, if I'm reading notes, if I'm looking somewhere else, it's very distracting to the audience. If I'm looking at the camera, it feels like I'm looking right into your eyes. It's much more engaging. And finally, point number 4, action. What's going on around your presenter? Is there cat climbing across the keyboard? Are there kids running around in the background? Are they animated or are they stiff as a board? Part of this is just simple presentation techniques. Part of it is the environment that we've all been thrust into, but your presenters need to be engaging. I understand that not everyone that is available or that you can get to do a presentation, especially when we're talking about putting on more programming than you normally do. Not everyone is a gifted, trained, or even comfortable presenter. But if they can just be natural, if they can just be comfortable and engage with the audience like they're sitting at a conference room table or they're there with the audience in person, that'll go a long way. Now, what I'm going to talk about in this next section is some creative ideas for programming that may alleviate some of that pain for some of your presenters, that may make it easier for people to be natural and to be comfortable in this virtual environment. The next topic that I want to talk about is content. If you're taking my advice and you're putting on more programming than you ever have before, how in the world are you going to come up with enough programs, enough topics, and enough presenters to keep up that pace? Well, it might be easier than you think. And the first thing that you have to understand is that there's more to life than CEUs. Hey, I get it. All of your members need to get their learning units in order to keep up their licensure or to keep their status within your association or their profession. But there is more out there than just learning units. And by the way, many of the things that I'm going to talk about, you can probably submit for and get approved for learning units anyway. Something that I would like for you to embrace, especially in this time of crisis, is that there's really two things that your members need for you to provide as leaders of their profession or as leaders of their association. And the first thing is resources. As we dropped into this COVID-19 crisis, there was this time of panic and triage and trying to find the resources that we needed to keep our businesses and our associations and our groups moving forward. That's not going to change as we transition through this crisis and start to come out on the other side. What will change is the phases that we're going through in order to get there. There's a time of triage, and there's a time of stabilization or getting to a new normal. And then there's a time of growth and then hopefully recovery on the other side. What your members are looking for and what your members will value are the resources that you can provide in order to help them transition through all those stages as they go through the crisis and out the other side. So be a resource, provide resources for your members, whether it's information on the PPP and the emergency loan systems, or it's human resources information or information on sick leave and the other programs that the government is putting in place, or business systems and operational best practices and leadership practices in times of crisis. Whatever you're doing, make sure that you as a group, as an association, are providing and becoming the resource that your members can't live without. The other thing that they're looking for in leadership is clarity. We have lots and lots of examples around us of people pretending to lead without adding any clarity to the situation. So anything that you can do to provide clarity for your members in this new context, in this evolving context, is of extreme value to them. Think about the best leaders that you can ever imagine, whether it's a political leader or a corporate leader or a group leader. The best leaders that you can ever think of have provided clarity in the midst of a changing context. That's what you need to be providing for your members. How can you do that? Through the content that you provide. I've seen different associations across the country providing all types, really creative types of content for their members. And I think, so as a person that has presented probably dozens of webinars in my lifetime, I think we all have to admit that recorded webinars just aren't that great, right? They're recorded. We're watching a recording of someone flipping through slides and giving a voiceover narrative to those slides. So what can we do that's more entertaining and more engaging than webinars? One thing that I've seen is happy hours. Lots and lots of groups, families, friends, and associations are having happy hours. Invite everybody. Tell them to bring their own drink. Bring their own topic discussions. You're not paying for a venue. You're not paying for refreshments. You don't actually have to provide any programming at all. All you have to do is set up the platform, set up the Eventbrite or whatever invitation portal you use, and go for it. Happy hours are a great example. I've seen some groups do town hall meetings, and I will warn you, town hall meetings are great. We can talk about the state of the economy. We can talk about the state of the association. We can talk about those things, but I would warn you, only do it once, because town halls are likely to devolve into something that you don't want if you host them over and over and do them time and time again. Another really creative idea that I've seen some groups using is sketch competitions. Everybody sits around, they sketch their own thing, they hold it up to the screen. It can be that loose and that interactive. There are ideas like panel discussions where you get a group of people that have a conversation about certain topics, and you take questions and comments from an audience, from a virtual audience, or an Ask the Expert session. If there's an expert on a certain topic, they can present just a few minutes on a topic that's, I would suggest, very timely, and take the questions and comments from the audience. You could do live interviews, or you could do a virtual tour. In fact, I'm going to host a virtual tour for a group in just a couple of weeks. You could even do your entire conference online on a virtual platform in a virtual setting. Think about that for just a minute. If you have a conference scheduled coming up in May or June or even July, and you don't yet know whether or not it's going to be safe for your members to travel to the location and to stay in a location together for a traditional conference, and you don't know if your members are even going to be able to afford the time or the money at that point, you could do your entire conference online through Zoom or a GoToMeeting or some other virtual platform. How's that for adding unexpected value to your members and your sponsors to not cancel, to not delay, to move forward in an, in fact, more affordable, more convenient way than you would have been doing otherwise? The final topic that I wanted to cover is payoff. What's the payoff of all of this? Well, first of all, let's go back to the very beginning and let's talk about the risk. Let's talk about the idea that people are having to make tough decisions. They'll continue to have to make tough decisions. And somewhere down the road, someone could say, you know what? I really haven't been getting that much from my association, from my group. Even people that have been members of your association for years and years and years are going to make hard decisions. And if they don't feel like they've been getting value from you, from your association, from your group over the past 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 months, what's the decision that they're going to have to make? I don't know. I don't want to have to face that. I don't want you to have to face that and deal with that sort of reality, but it's out there. So what's the payoff? The payoff is that if you continue to engage with your membership and your sponsorship, if you continue to deliver value and even unexpected value to those members and those sponsors, then you win, right? If they don't have to make the hard decision to cross you off the list, you win. And think about it a little bit deeper. If we're able to put on and deliver that value and put on more programming and more education than we ever have before without having to travel, without having to secure and pay for venues, without having to provide name tags and refreshments and all of those things that you invest in every program that you put on, you're giving double bang for your buck and getting double return on your investment. You can put on programming. You can provide programming and education that's engaging, that's interesting, that's entertaining, that covers learning units. You can do all of those things for less investment on a virtual platform than you have in doing live events in normal times. And without the ability to put on our live programming, in-person programming, in these times, it's critical that you do these things. Now, if you follow through the things that I talked about in this video, I gave you some some best practices. I gave you some ideas. I gave you some mindsets. I gave you some things that you have to do in order to make this successful. I hope you'll follow along those things, and I hope you'll use this information. I hope you'll use this to be successful, to leverage virtual tools and virtual technologies to be even more successful than you were before this crisis. That would be great. I would love that. I'm here to help. So if you have questions on any of the information that I've presented in this video, or if you need help with any of the points that I covered today in this video, reach out. Let's schedule a time to talk. All we need is 10 or 15 minutes, and we can figure out how to keep you moving forward towards success after this crisis.